Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. This is my intro episode to the show. So, this is me introducing the show. I'm going to talk about why I wanted to start a podcast. I'll talk about some of the goals of the podcast. I'm going to go through some quick little stories about the creative process that I think you will find interesting. And I'm going to go into the three big reasons why I'm starting this podcast and why I think it's going to be helpful to you. Why should you, out of all the other podcasts that already exist, why should you listen to this one? So I'll start off by doing this by saying I just finished recording the intro for the show, and it actually took me a pretty long time to find a version or to come up with a version of the intro that I really liked. There were quite a few changes. There were quite a few back and forths. Initially, it was kind of too vague. There wasn't the idea of what this show stood for wasn't clear enough. It was just too broad, too general, and it also just took me a really long time to develop the a short enough intro. There were so many ideas, there were so many thoughts on what this all meant, on the goals, that I really found it difficult condensing that into something that was, 30 to 45 seconds. So I just finished an intro. And you probably heard it if you listen to this, if you listen to the podcast already, or the first part of this podcast. And it really did take me a long time to get it to a point where I felt like it conveyed the point of the podcast, but also was inspirational and broad enough that it would be interesting. And that was a lot of what the creative process of this podcast was. I actually flip-flopped a lot on the names. I think I started coming up with a name in January of this year, and I'm now recording this in March. And it took me a really long time to come up with the name. I had a ton of different ideas for what the name would be. And eventually, I kind of kept coming back to this idea of the Better Man podcast, because it was inspiring. We all want to be better. At least I think most of us, if you're listening to this, you probably want to be better. But I also kind of wanted to redefine what that meant. What did being better mean? Because I didn't want to come up with a podcast that just said, this is what we need to do. This is what you need to do to be better. Because one of my core beliefs is that we are all different. We're all unique. We all have different values, or we reorganize our values differently. So we have certain values that are more important than others. We have certain core beliefs. So it's not really possible for us to hold ourselves to a universal set of standards, right? If we're all different, that just doesn't make sense to me. And I also thought that it was possible to be more successful, to be better, while not doing so at the expense of your own health or your own well-being. I think and I think about that in terms of myself a lot, that I'm constantly trying to be better, but I'm doing so in a way that probably isn't great for my mental or my emotional well-being. I think there's a lot of guilt attached to, the success that I've been able to have, and, comparing that to somebody else and saying, well, I haven't been able to do that. What's wrong with me? Or why haven't I done things differently? Why am I not using my time more efficiently? And so I wanted to kind of redefine being better as not just someone who's more successful, not just someone who's improving, but also someone who's doing that and taking care of themselves at the same time. Because, ultimately we could be getting lots of success out of life, but if we're not happy, if we're not feeling fulfilled by that, if we're not, having great relationships, if we're not able to love ourselves, if we're not able to really accept who we are while we're doing all of that, then what's the point, right? I mean, we're doing all these things because we think that they're going to make us happy. But if we're sacrificing our happiness for that, then why would we do that? So I think there is a better way to be better. I think we can be successful. I think we can also be happy. I think we can also be healthy as we do that. And, as I was thinking about this idea for the podcast, I asked myself a ton of questions. I bought a book, or actually Richard, our web developer, bought a book for me and sent it to me. And I went through the whole book. I think it's called Everybody Has a Podcast and So Can You, something along those lines. And I skimmed some of it, but a lot of it was just focused on kind of asking questions about what's the vision for the podcast? What are you really trying to do? And when I first started, I didn't have specific answers. It really took a lot of time and thought. And even doing the podcast episodes themselves and until I had a better idea on what the goals of this show would be. And full disclosure, I have several months worth of episodes already ready to go. I actually did most of these episodes before I even had the name figured out. So you're going to hear me say welcome to the Manful Yoga podcast on almost all of these episodes in this first batch because I just didn't have the name yet. I was still developing it. And as I was doing the shows, as I was interviewing people, I really had a goal in each episode to try and go deeper than just the basic physical fitness questions. Like, yes, I want people to understand who you are. I want people to understand what it is that you teach and to give them information that I know is going to be helpful. But I also want you to go into the personal struggles and the processes that you used to create more clarity for yourself. That you used to find what you really wanted to do, or find the ways in which you wanted to present what you do. I wanted to learn about things that really affected you, things that were difficult, that you had to struggle through, challenges that forced you to revise your beliefs about yourselves. And as I did that, that was when I found like I was having the best conversations. That was when I felt like I was most into the show. It was when I was getting people to think about difficult things that they had gone through and what they did and what they learned as a result of those experiences. And so rather than the show being, just only about these are things that you can do to live better, I also wanted it to be an opportunity to have deeper conversations with cool men. I mean, to have these conversations that I wouldn't normally be having, things that are just kind of, more vulnerable conversations that you just don't have with other men kind of in this society. So there were a lot of things that I was trying to do with, these shows, with these episodes, but selfishly, there was a lot that I wanted to get out of these. So ultimately, I don't want to make this too long, so I'm going to kind of go into these three big reasons that I think this is going to be helpful and that I wanted to do this. So number one is because podcasting is a good platform for me to talk about aspects of health and wellness that really matter to me, but aren't well received, or just frankly wouldn't perform well, wouldn't do well on some of my existing platforms. So, Facebook, Instagram, those can be good for short conversations, for good photos, for short videos. YouTube, that is where, I upload free videos to try and reach a wider audience, to let them know about my app and my website. But those aren't great platforms to go into more depth about something that isn't eye-popping or isn't sexy. So for me, the podcast was a way for me to go into these other areas of fitness that are really important, that are things that are going to help, they're going to help you be healthier, be happier, be more fulfilled, and things that really matter when it comes to creating personal change, but just wouldn't do well on other platforms. So that was number one. I wanted to talk about different things and I wanted to go into more depth. Number two is because I had a personal desire to learn more about these areas. I want to have conversations with other guys. I wanted to go deep with them, and I wanted to try and understand things that they had done or things that they had gone through, which led to significant change, which might be difficult in the moment as it was happening, but they ultimately came out better for it, or they learned something from it. And I wanted to, and as I had these conversations, I had questions for them ahead of time, but when we really found was the best part of the conversation was when we had these follow-up questions, was when I asked them to go deeper, or when I asked them to clarify what they meant in this part of the conversation. So number two, I wanted to have these, I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to be able to learn these from experiences that these guys that I respect had. And then number three, and there are a lot of reasons, but these are the big three. The third reason is because I wanted an opportunity to connect with other men and to have conversations that really mattered, to get vulnerable, to ask them difficult questions that, often make us uncomfortable, because that's something that I noticed over the past few years is something that's really missing from my life. Having these vulnerable conversations, having these conversations that, as you're talking about it, you feel uncomfortable. You're poking at something that's squishy. You're poking at something that, there's no armor there. There's nothing there, but they're there to protect me. But I found that, I have these walls up, and in order for me to be happier, in order for me to be able to really experience the fruits of all these things that I've been doing to try and better myself and to try and help other people through what I do with Manful Yoga, I needed to practice taking down those walls and really connect with people. You can't just choose the emotions that you want to feel. If you shut some of them out, you're not going to feel the good ones too. And I've learned so much in the past few years through therapy, through journaling, through self-exploration that I haven't been able to share on Manful Yoga, and things that are so helpful to not just your overall physical fitness, but also your comprehensive wellness, your well-being, your overall health, your mental, your emotional health, that I wanted a better place to be able to share that, to make it more of the conversation, to just make it normal to be able to discuss these things, which are the ultimate goals of all these things that we're doing. So there are a lot of goals behind this. There are a lot of reasons behind why I wanted to start this podcast, but those are the big ones. And those are the ones that I keep coming back to as I'm refining the goals of this podcast, as I'm writing, I'm writing a blog to introduce this. I'm writing out the introduction that you heard at the beginning of the show, writing out, social media posts to tell people about the podcast. But, overall, I think it's time that we kind of start looking at being better as men in a different way. I think it's not just about success. I know it's not just about success. I know that our physical fitness isn't the only part of our well-being, that we have to look at our emotional, our mental well-being. We have to look at our relationships with other people. We have to look at our own self-limiting beliefs that are holding us back. We have to take the time to create more clarity about ourselves, about how we understand ourselves. What are our core beliefs? What are our values? And we're not going to get that through exercise alone. And rather than, directing you somewhere else, I wanted to get it, and I wanted to explore this on my own. And what better way than starting a podcast? And honestly, what greater reward than to be able to share that journey and share this with you. So if you're interested, if this sounds good to you, I hope it does. If you already know me from my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, my members area, if you have bought, my books, one of my books or my DVDs, I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of men with the content that I've already created. And I know firsthand the transformative power of improving physical fitness, of reclaiming your physical ability. But I also know that it goes much deeper than that. There's much more depth. And this podcast, in many ways, is my attempt to go into that depth firsthand, to talk about it, to hear about it from other people, and to really experience it as well. So download the episodes when they come out. I think you can, save the podcast or whatever it's called. I'm brand new to this, so that when new future episodes are released. Leave a review for the podcast if you can. It'll be super helpful. Be great if you could listen to a couple episodes first before leaving, a review. But I'd love to hear a review from you. And I want you to know that we have a lot of really cool guests set up. We've got Mackenzie and Kelly Starrett kicking this off. We're gonna have Aaron Alexander from the Align podcast. We've got Joe Hansen, who is the guy behind the Be Smart, or It's Okay to Be Smart YouTube channel. Amazing guy. He's a friend of mine. He lives here in Austin. We actually hang out and bring our kids together all the time. We've got Eric Bandholz, the founder of Beard Brand. We've got so many cool guys coming onto the show, and I know you're going to get a ton out of this. Ultimately, I hope it inspires you to be better men, more comprehensive men, men with physical, mental, and emotional well-being, who are more aware of themselves, more in tune with their core values and their beliefs, and are striving to create alignment between what they do and what they believe, who they are at their cores. So, thank you for listening to this intro episode. There will be more. I will be putting out much more information on this. Be sure to follow me on my blog, manfulyoga.com/blog, social media on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And make sure you are on my email list as well. And that's going to be the best way to find out about this stuff and much more. So thanks again for listening to this intro episode. And I look forward to not seeing you. I look forward to you hearing me on more in the future. All right, guys. See ya. If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.